Is weed addictive? And if it is, what are the withdrawals like? That is this episode's podcast of Unhinged Addiction. Talking with Keith, who is a psychiatrist with Sunflower Sober. If you haven't downloaded it, download Sunflower Sober. It's an amazing app. But to actually go into what are these withdrawals really like, and how does weed get you addicted? It's kind of controversial, so I love being able to talk to a psychiatrist about this. If you haven't followed me before, my name is Eric Zink. I go by the Mr. Impulsive on TikTok and on Instagram, or you can go to ericbzink.com or Eric Zink on here when you go to Facebook or even on YouTube. So let me jump into this. I've been experimenting a little bit with our podcast here. This was actually a live stream that I did with Keith that I wanted on TikTok just because it was great to see a lot of the interaction and some of the other questions and stuff that came up. We may end up doing more podcasts live on TikTok because it is kind of fun, and then just converting it over to a podcast. So here it is with Keith talking about, is marijuana addictive? All right. I didn't see this invite come through. You guys have no idea how excited I am to have him on this with me.
Hey, Eric, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
How's it going?
It's going good. I was just explaining. There's about 200 people in this live, and if somebody asks a question, I am going to be a little ADHD and possibly interrupt you a little bit. So I apologize on that first and foremost, though, Keith. But you are, like I was saying, the first psychiatrist I've ever met that you've changed one of my viewpoints of addiction. And I was even telling my wife about it. I used to think, man, you have to want it, like to get sober. And if you relapse off of a billboard or whatever, it was just because you were weak. And after talking to you last week, it has changed so much of my aspect, and it made me really observe my own life in the way of not even addiction, but just mental health and things that happen to me mentally. So we both work with Sunflower Sober, guys. If you haven't downloaded it, link is in the bio. There's a free 30-day trial. And we are focusing on weed, ironically, right now. And so I wanted to talk to you, Keith, about, actually, I can't really call it that. I have to call it ZA addiction. What makes that addictive?
Cannabis specifically.
Yes.
Yeah. It's such a good question. And I think it's hard to answer, Eric, because we're still learning a lot about cannabis. And to say it's all good or all bad, I think is giving it a bad rap. There are aspects of cannabis, like aspects of the CBD, even the THC that people with cancer, they find that it's helpful for sleep, it's helpful for pain. We're finding just many different ways that it is helpful. At the same time, that doesn't take away the fact that it is an addictive substance, and it does come with a lot of issues. And some of those issues are ironically not getting sleep. So some people, because of their genetics, because of the way that their body metabolizes substances, you might have the opposite reaction with cannabis. Just like someone might not react to alcohol or caffeine in the way that you and I react to it. So it can be very addictive, and it can actually cause some harm. It can affect your anxiety levels as well. So when I think about any addictive substances, we talked about this on the podcast, but I think about it as hijacking your reward system. And it really does, because there is a part of your brain that's deep inside called your limbic system that controls two things. It controls your rewards and your desire to not have any risk. And then it also controls your emotions. So all the things that help you connect with other human beings. And substances act just there. It targets that dopamine circuit deep in your brain. And it's almost like someone is being deployed to hijack those parts of your brain. And it really controls what you're craving. There's a GPS system in that part of your brain. So it tells you, like, where are the rewards? When were the rewards? Who was it associated with? And so we actually call those things cues and triggers. So even if you're going out on your day, if you see a cue or trigger, your dopamine will actually release. And so it's the constant doing of that actually makes addiction really hard to quit.
And I guess I never really realized this, and I've shared about it before, is like a lot of addicts will get high essentially before we get high.
Yeah.
And that is because your brain, and I didn't know that, releases dopamine just with the thought process of it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to cannabis, how much? I mean, it's not really known though as a dopamine drug. So how does it still become that addictive? Because my drugs of choice were stimulants, and so it's always one of those things that I can relate to stimulants really well. But anything that's more of a downer, I would say, like to me, cannabis is a downer, even though some people it lifts them up. I don't get the draw to it mentally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think your experience tracks with a lot of people. There's just a lot of different variability that just, again, it depends on your genetics. It also depends on your tolerance level to some of these substances. What I think people, including myself before, like my misunderstanding was that a substance needs to like physically like latch on to parts of your brain for it to cause addiction. And that's just not true, because gambling or pornography, those aren't substances. You're not like ingesting money, or you're not ingesting porn in the same way you are ingesting like caffeine or alcohol or cannabis. But at the same time, they all act on your reward system, this prediction computer inside your brain that's saying, hey, that thing that I just tried was rewarding. I'm going to go back to that thing. I'm going to secrete dopamine so that I remember, hey, this was the person, place, and sounds and tastes that remind me of this thing. And what happens over time, you're exactly right, Eric, it shifts. So it's no longer I get dopamine when I use, I get dopamine when I think about it, or I get dopamine when I am getting close to that reward. So like, let's say I pass by a vape shop, boom, that part of your brain starts firing and saying, hey, I remember I got a really cool reward here. I'm going to have to go in that direction, go inside the shop and buy something, because your brain is trying to predict what is the shortest route to getting the rewards that you want. And after a really, really long time, your brain just gets hijacked, and it just only prioritizes that reward over everything else in your life.
So how do you even realize or come to realize that this is what's happening? Because like how you said that, like I could relate it to alcohol. Like you quit alcohol, somebody goes, okay, I'm going to stop, I'm not going to drink. But then later that day, no matter how much you hyped yourself up, you find yourself driving into that one liquor store you always go to, or that one gas station you always go to, and you go in, and next thing you know, you're buying this, and you're like, you know what, I'll just do it tomorrow, and I'll quit. How do you even become self-aware that this is subconsciously what you're doing?
You used a really good word, which is this is like something that is not you're aware of. It like again, it exists deep down in the reptile part of your brain. Sometimes this part can be automatic. Just like if you ever saw a bear while you were hiking, you don't want to be thinking about like, hey, what are the pros and cons of me running in that direction? Should I like talk to the bear first? No. You want it to be automatic. I'm running, and I don't know that I'm scared until I'm actually running. That like you just don't want to process that. That's how you survive out in the wilderness. Same concept. This is the same part of your brain that controls your emotions. When you're using, what happens is those circuits in your brain get really hardwired. When we talked about this last, I used this analogy of like water carving a canyon. So like the Grand Canyon, it's super big, but very impressive. But it really started out with very simple tools, just water, sandstone, and time, maybe some wind. But with the continuing of that water path, you can build these really magnificent canyons. Same thing with your brain. It's these small repeated habits that we get ourselves into that build these deep canyons in our brain, which we call circuits. And there's this concept of neuroplasticity, which means that your brain is flexible. It can actually change. In addiction, it gets hard to have neuroplasticity because these circuits are so automatic. The way that you get out of that is by building a new circuit, build a new canyon. So even though you like take the water and move it into a different direction, start building a new and healthy canyon, that old canyon will still be there. It still is a risk for you to potentially relapse or have that trigger. Even 10 years after being sober, you might have a little bit of like a whiff of that cue because it's still there. What people who quit and who become sober really well do is that they build a more magnificent Grand Canyon so that they don't even have to think about that old addiction. They can kind of move on with new goals in their life. So it really requires time. It requires patience, and just know that it's a journey. This is not a one and done. Like, I'm gonna white knuckle it. This is like a commitment. It requires a community. It requires people who are with you on that journey to help you through.
So then, when it comes to cannabis, why do you think? And I mean this, like, it is, out of all of the substances out there, it almost has the worst stigma, that you can't be addicted to cannabis. It's not that dangerous. It's not the same as doing an opiate or some of these different substances out there. It's nature's special remedy. But it's actually truly that addictive. Does that play a role in people getting addicted to the substance?
I think you're right. I think that it is different. So it's like you said, it's not like heroin. It's not like alcohol, where it is affecting very, very strongly how you're coping in the moment, and it is affecting how your reward system lights up when you're using it. I think cannabis has this perception that, hey, it's not as addictive as other substances, which may or may not be true. What is true is that sometimes people use cannabis for a purpose. So it's always helpful to think about, like, hey, what is that purpose for? Like, are you using it to emotionally cope? Are you having anxiety and you're using it as a self-medication or a crutch to get through the day? Are you using it to numb in any way? And whenever you're using something as a crutch, even if it's not a substance, like even if it's like playing video games or something, there is the potential for you to build a reward circuitry that stunts your growth, because part of growing and part of facing your fears is doing that, like facing your fears, addressing whatever crutch you're using. And cannabis can kind of take you away from that. It can help you avoid some of the challenges in your life, and that can cause some dysfunction for people. I'd rather smoke a joint rather than talk to that friend or have a difficult conversation. It can really cloud your judgment in that way.
And that makes sense. I mean, is that what just? How does it become then so? Because it's not necessarily, again, producing dopamine. How does it become then so addictive? Because people will always be like, "Oh, I can quit this at any time," and then you talk to people and they actually had a lot of trouble getting sober from it.
Yeah.
What in it actually makes it then addictive to you, that gets to where you actually make this like a part of your daily ritual and daily life? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the way that cannabis works is that we're learning about this, but it binds to a couple of receptors in your brain. There are cannabinoid receptors, and they have many different purposes. One of them being like to decrease the level of consciousness, and then pain, for some people, pain. But overall, the experience that you get is a level of detachment or dissociation from reality, which is an altered state, just like any substance would do. So you're basically detaching your prefrontal cortex, the CEO part of your brain, from the limbic system that is deep down, that might be causing anxiety, that might be causing fear, so that in the moment you feel good. Now, even though that in itself doesn't like release dopamine, the fact that you're deriving pleasure from that state is causing dopamine to be involved. So it's not the substance, but it's like your interpretation of being detached or dissociative, like being in that pleasurable self-medicated state. That's a reward, right? And so over time, if you keep using that reward, you keep using it, and it's to become more of a priority in your life, you can have a situation where we would call that an addiction, because it is taking away from the most important things in your life, and it's becoming something that is compulsive. Like, you have to use it in order to just even function throughout the day. That's where you can start with something that might be mild than heroin, but still impact your life in a similar way.
Now, do you believe that cannabis is a gateway drug?
That's a good question. I am still seeing people with cannabis use disorder. And I will say I work in San Francisco. So this is something that is a little bit more kind of in the public's perception, and I think people have their own views of cannabis. I think that it could be because cannabis we know affects the way that human brains develop, and we have studies looking at the brains of children when they use cannabis and when they don't use cannabis, and it affects how well your brain actually develops. So if you look at someone who's been using cannabis for 10 years during their teenage years versus someone who's not, that prefrontal cortex, the thickness is decreased when they're using cannabis, which, that is your brain's like reasoning system. That is your brain's like value system. It's how you choose what you want to do in life and what is meaningful to you. When you decrease its effectiveness, I think that just adds a vulnerability to anybody to be more impulsive, to have less control over your emotions. And I can see for some people who have risk, it can be a gateway drug, but not for everybody. Everyone is different. Everyone has different reactions to substances. But for what we're seeing in the research, it does affect how your brain develops and how well you're able to control your impulses.
So when it comes to getting off of it, a lot of people will talk about like they have a lot of mental withdrawals, like more mental withdrawals than they do physical withdrawals. One of them being sleep, one of them being mood and irritability, and then another one being appetite. This is what I've had people talk to me about. How does it actually, like, appetite kind of makes sense to me, the sleep, but the mood never made sense to me of how cannabis could affect somebody's mood when getting sober from it, because it didn't really do, and tell me if I'm probably wrong on this, it didn't do anything really to serotonin, and which is like kind of that mood stabilizer. So how do you get so irritable getting sober from it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that serotonin is only one piece of the puzzle. We know serotonin is involved in many things. It controls your mood. It also works in your like gut. So like all the neurons, like you have a second brain in your gut, which is just amazing. Most of those receptors are serotonin. So there's just a very like sophisticated thing going on with our nervous system. But there's so many different other chemicals in our brain, and they all do different things. And what I think is happening is on a big picture level, like if you imagine you have a balloon and you try to submerge it underwater, that's kind of like what you're doing with your brain when you're on a substance. You're like trying to keep that balloon underwater. The substance does a good job in either creating like a downward effect if you're using a sedative, or an upward effect if you're using a stimulant. But the brain is a very sophisticated computer. So the minute you stop using that substance after you've been using it for a long time, that balloon is going to shoot out of the water, and it's going to give you the exact opposite effect. And this is what we see with people with alcohol withdrawal. So instead of a sedative effect, we see people with anxiety. They might even have seizures if they've been using alcohol for a really long time. Same thing with opioids. It sedates your brain. When you're off of opioids, your brain becomes extremely active and even dangerously so. So what I think is happening with cannabis is it's giving this layer of sedation, but also like anti-anxiety effects because you're associating it with being relaxed and being able to disconnect. When you remove that, your dopamine system is like, hey, where did my thing go? I am running on empty now. Like I had, if you started with like 5 dopamine receptors, if you've been using substances for a long time, you might have 1 left. And that one receptor is like, yo, where did my rewards go? And your brain gets really frustrated. Again, this is the emotional center of your brain. This is the part of your brain that associates reward and weighs risk and predicts what's going to happen. So if you're not getting that same level of reward, and you're not getting it outside, like in your loved ones or like your favorite dog, like seeing them and enjoying life, your brain is going to be understandably really frustrated with that. And so what we see is not only do we see lots of anxiety and depression, but there's this thing called anhedonia or apathy. It's dopamine driven, and it's a state of a lack of enjoyment or a lack of motivation for rewards. And it is very much related to how many dopamine receptors you still have in your brain. When you use substances for a really long time, your brain acclimates by slowly decreasing the numbers because it's getting overstimulated. So when you take away the substance, you're running on empty, and it takes a while for your brain to build back all of those receptors and get back to normal.
I think that was the thing that blew my mind the most, is learning that your brain actually decreases the amount of brain receptors it has. Like that was like when we were started talk about that, it was like it started to kind of make more and more sense of why it was so hard to get happy when I got sober, because I was a heavy user for a really long time, and I didn't realize that my brain had a lot of years to go, okay, we're just going to keep cutting back.
Yeah.
What can you take? What can somebody even take? Is there anything that helps at all with the dopamine process of like building back brain receptors? Is there anything?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think one thing that has helped when I talk to people who are trying to quit and be sober is just the fact to expect it and not to get frustrated with it. I mean, it is a frustrating thing to go through, but when you think about it as like, hey, this is a problem with me versus this is a problem that every human being who has a brain goes through, it's just like it helps you stick with it longer. And just know that through time, your brain will acclimate. You will build back those receptors and it will get better. That is also something that helps people kind of when they're planning and when they're thinking about like, hey, am I failing here, or is this just part of the journey? It's usually part of the journey. I would say try and find new healthy ways of getting your dopamine. So whether that's a hobby that you really want to work on, a lot of people who quit end up with a lot of time on their hands because you're no longer spending time trying to get that substance. So try and find something that's meaningful to you, a project, a friend group, a dog. Like these are all things that are just, these are natural, great rewards that life has to offer. And there are so many things that you can just put in to refill that cup after your brain has changed in that way.
And that's why I love talking with you, because you being a psychiatrist and in the medical field, and when people know when it comes to psychiatrists, I mean, the amount of schooling and stuff that you have to do, it's so much better to hear it from like almost a voice of authority in a way than it is going to, and I think this is what I struggle with. I struggled, and I don't know why, and maybe you can clarify this for me. I would go to like an AA meeting or an NA meeting, and there would be, Michael over there who is 90 days or 60 days sober. And he's telling me how great his life is all of a sudden. Things are just changing. I'm like, I'd be like 2 years sober, and I'd be like, I want to fight you outside because my life isn't this way. And then it made me not trust programs because I couldn't relate. And then I felt that those people had to be lying. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Yeah, to your point, I think that there are ways that doctors get it wrong too. And we can also be a part of the problem in making someone feel shame or making it so complicated where you're like, whoa, like, what is this? I don't know. Why are you giving me medications? So it can be like a situation where the doctor is actually not helping you. But I do think that there is a lot of room for us to just really like learn, like, hey, how does the brain work? How does my brain work? Like, what does my reward system look like? And just really have like a candid conversation of like how to actually get better. Like what's important to you? Why do you want to quit? How can we get there together? Like those are just the very simple questions I think every doctor should have with their patients, and not everyone gets that. Which is why I appreciate working with you, is because we have a very a similar journey in our experience with addiction and our family members who have struggled with addiction. And so that kind of is like, it's like a nice shared understanding. It's like we're on the same page. It helps with like the conversations that we have. It's also just really fun to learn about the brain, because then you're like, oh shit, like this is how it works. It's not just me. This is part of the human journey, and it's not a failure. We're all on it, and we're all moving forward together.
No, it really it's fun to actually have those kind of conversations, and it's almost like it kind of expands your mind, and it gets you to as soon as you can name things or it makes sense finally, it's like you have these aha moments. It's never as bad then as it once was, because then if it does happen to you, you're like, oh, I talked about this, or I know what this is, and I know what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
So when it comes to cannabis, I mean, what are the physical withdrawals that you see when somebody's going through withdrawals from it? Are there any?
There are less physical withdrawals than mental withdrawals, I'll say. And I'm not using clinical terms. I'm saying that there's something happening in your brain, and then there's something happening in your body. When your body no longer has the THC, like if you have pain, that pain might get worse. So it really might be something you need to talk with your doctor about. Like, hey, I'm about to quit cannabis. Can we talk about other forms of pain management? Because I want to be sober. So your doctor can help you in that way. But then there's also like changes to your sympathetic nervous system. So your heart rate might get a little fast. You might notice just like a little bit more tension in your chest because the anxiety is getting a little bit worse. And these are all things that tend to be temporary, like they get better after you stop using. You might have like different aches occur just because your body is no longer getting that substance. And it's not damage that's happening to your body. It's just your body rechanging its temperature system. It's saying like, there was this thing I used to get all the time. I'm not getting it. So now I have to change my dial a little bit so that I can reacclimate. In the brain, I see a lot of anxiety. So this might be a fact of no longer having that THC acting or CBD acting in different parts of the brain. It also might mean that whatever you were coping for, like whatever anxiety in your life you were using before, is now coming back to the forefront. Now it's no longer unconscious. And so you have to think about that a little bit more. So those things can make it difficult, but it's not uncommon. So like if you're talking with a therapist, you're talking with a doctor, those are things that you can talk with them, like, hey, let's anticipate this part of the process. How can I get through and not be so anxious while also being sober?
So how does THC then affect anxiety that much? So for me, it's one of those that I love how you talk about genetics and how substances are so different for everybody, because I know a lot of people who got off of stimulant meds or even stimulant substances, and they would use THC to help like calm them down or help them sleep. And man, my ex-wife, when I got sober, she was a hardcore stoner. I mean, hardcore. I've never seen anyone smoke as much as she did. And she would always try and get me, be like, oh, this will help you with your anxiety or whatever. And it would spike my anxiety so bad. I would start rocking and I would just have to go to sleep. I'd have to get it out. How does it affect your anxiety like that?
There's two levels. So like, again, I think we keep talking about like this part of the brain, like where the molecules attaching, and yeah, cannabis occurs there. I think what we haven't talked about yet is also like the coping part. Like,
okay,
I don't know if you have kids, Eric.
I suck kids.
Yeah. I don't either. But I do take care of kids. And one of the things you notice is that kids are just learners. Like they'll do weird stuff. They will put weird things in their mouths. They will develop habits that the parents may or may not want. One of those things is like sucking your thumb. And some people suck their thumb for 2 years. And there are some kids that suck their thumb until like they're 12. And that can kind of be a concern. The thumb sucking is not like an addictive thing, but it becomes a coping mechanism for life. So when you're scared or you're worried or you don't know what to do, you go to sucking your thumb because it's the thing that you know how to do, and it kind of gives you a level of control in your life. That's the same thing that I see sometimes with things like cannabis, is like you're looking for control. And what essentially you're doing is you're choosing something outside of yourself for control in your life, not coming within. Like, not your locus of control is no longer within yourself to make the shots. It's like that thing, I need it for me to be in control. And when you do that, you've lost power. And that's where it can really get hard to quit sometimes.
And when you said that, I couldn't help but laugh. It is one of the funniest things is like, so one of God, I hate the word trigger. I just hate it. But
Yeah.
it's so funny because when certain things hit me just right, I will start laughing. It's almost like this defense mechanism of like not trying to just like interrupt somebody or something. Of I think any addict out there can relate that we use for control. We use because we know it's gonna give us this desired response. Like I would use booger sugar because I knew it was going to make me feel a certain way. But the problem is we use to make it feel a certain way, but you lose control over. Like how can it's like the biggest oxymoron. This is going to make me feel this way, but then it's almost like I'm so obsessed with feeling this way that the impulse control, and now I use so much that it's wrecking me. I've watched, and I can use my ex-wife when it comes to cannabis for an example. I used to hate this. I was sober, and this was one of the things that helped kind of destroy our marriage. Was I'd gotten sober off these substances. She was still heavily using cannabis. She would come home and she would have a little bit, and as the night progressed, she would get to the point where like she didn't want to leave the house, wouldn't leave the couch, wouldn't want to just go to sleep or whatever. And I'm like, how does it go from this is my coping mechanism, I'm going to control how this makes me feel, to now you have no control over it. It literally consumes you, and you will use until you pass out or until you whatever. Where does that disconnect come from?
It comes from how the brain works, unfortunately. And when we're talking about control, I think what we're also talking about is like executive functioning, impulse, like controlling your impulses, being able to choose one priority over another, like saying, hey, this is what I value more than this thing over here. And that is your prefrontal cortex, my friend. Like that is the most important part of your brain when you're trying to get sober. It's your brain's CEO that is supposed to control everything else. You're supposed to be able to say like, hey, I'm feeling anxious. That's okay. I'm gonna do this thing I'm scared of anyways, even though I'm scared. I'm just gonna do it. You can just do things. But what happens with addiction is that it's almost backwards. So you get what I call it hijacking. The substance hijacks the inner part of your brain, that limbic system, the lizard part, that is where all your emotions are. It's where all of your priorities in life can be, because it's where your reward system is, it's where your fear system is, and it's where your brain's GPS system is. So it's like the map of like where all the good things in life are. When that gets hijacked, it then overrides your prefrontal cortex. It then says like, hey, it doesn't matter what your goals are. This thing is rewarding. So I'm going to choose it more so than my friends. I'm going to choose it more so than my job. I'm going to choose it more so than the people and things in my life that I find meaningful. And it's really like you get into a state where it's backward signaling. It should be top down, but it's bottom up. And it's saying like, I need this substance over everything else.
No, and it is weird because you do give it all up for a substance because it means more to you than anything else. Or the only time you do go out is if it's also people that use that substance, because then you have like something in common with them and you get the best of both worlds.
Can I ask you a question, Eric?
Yeah.
What was what were some of the things that you experienced that you thought was the most helpful in your recovery? Like what are some of those things, or maybe insights that you were like, oh wow, like this is important to me, and it actually took me from 0 to 60 in terms of getting sober?
Was finding out why I used. I struggled a lot in the very beginning of my sobriety for a couple years. I did what everyone told me to do. They told me to go to AA. They told me to get a sponsor. They told me do A, B, C, and D, and you're going to be sober, and you're going to have your life will be okay. And so at first, I was really motivated, really excited by that, and like, okay, I'm gonna follow what people are telling me to do. And then it flipped after about, I would say, 4 or 5 months, and I was going to AA meetings. It was always the same crap. It was always It was never any new tools. And the more that I was growing into my sobriety, the more I started to struggle because no one was talking about, you know, the boredom or my depression or any of this. And so it made me feel really alone. So I struggled and I got really angry because I kind of just felt like everybody was lying. And my biggest aha moment was actually 5 years into my sobriety. That I still hated being sober. I still struggled with being sober. And I went to a AA meeting because it was like I was still self-sabotaging and I was doing everything that people were saying. You've heard the term a dry drunk, right?
Heard that. Can you explain that to me?
So kind of that term with AA is like a dry drunk is somebody who is sober, but they didn't go through the steps and any of that. So they still have all the behaviors that they had when they were an active addict. Mm-hmm. And I had that, but I did all the steps. I made my amends. I did all this and I was still self-sabotaging. I was still doing all of this stuff. And I went and I got my 5-year chip in Meridian, Idaho here, right outside of Boise. And I broke down and started sobbing. And I was like, F this chip. This doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. I'm 5 years sober. Like my life is this repeating cycle. Every 4 years, it just something collapses. And I don't understand. Like maybe I need to rework the steps. I need a sponsor. I need all this stuff. And I was just asking for just help. And I ended up getting a guy afterwards. He came up, he's like, hey, I'll be your sponsor. And, you know, we get on our knees and we pray and I get numbers and I get some numbers of the guys there. And it was all like what I'd done before. And I'm like, okay, maybe this time it's going to work. And we were outside talking and he was like, hey, I'm going to come outside with me. I want to introduce you to somebody. And we're talking. And I said something about, August is kind of a rough month for me. My dad took his life on the 13th of August, and then my wife took her life on the 27th of August. So August is just kind of a rough month, and it happened to be, it was coming up. It was July 25th. I was getting my 5-year chip, and the guy looked at me. He's like, Jesus, man. He's like, and I'm like, oh no, dude, don't. He's like, no, you can't blow that off. He's like, that's a lot. Like, have you ever really went to like trauma therapy? And I'm like, I went to therapy. It didn't really help. He's like, no, like actually like trauma therapy to like dig in on this stuff. I'm like, no, like I didn't even know there was there's therapy for that. You know what I mean? And that was the biggest aha moment for me ever in my sobriety of realizing, hey, maybe this is my problem. Maybe, and then the more that I went into therapy, the more I was so upset at myself for like not going to rehab and not going for a lot of the different things that I did, I know now to do, because I'm like, I went through 5 years of hell that I didn't have to because I didn't realize how much my addiction now looking back was trauma driven. It was just pure self-medication and how this substance made me feel. That stimulant gave me energy, but it also allowed me not to think. Where like crystal, for example, which is kind of the same as ADHD meds. I didn't ever like doing that drug, and I had done it before a few times, but that drug made me think, and I didn't like that feeling. That calmed me down even more. Where the white stuff, it didn't make me think. And it really started to connect a lot of dots in my brain of going, oh, wow, I need to numb my thought process. And why? Why do I have to disassociate from life so much? And that's what alcohol really did for me. And that was my biggest aha moment and my biggest learning moment, because in the very beginning, I felt like I was just lying to everybody. And I was such a fraud by telling people to go to AA and do the 12 steps and do all this because it didn't work for me. And I wasn't saying it with conviction. I was going along with what everybody else said. Just, this is what you need to do. And it took me, and I kept thinking that there was a right and wrong way to get sober. And that sucked when it's not working for you like it supposedly is for others.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, that's
I
why that's why I like meeting you, and like even being part of, like, and again, everybody who's in these lives, if you haven't downloaded Sunflower Sober, get 30 days. Link is in the bio. Download it. Sunflower Sober. Um, that's why even in getting involved in this app, and it was funny because I'd always wanted to build an app. I always wanted to build a sobriety app because my problem that I also had in the very beginning, I was really alone. Like, my ex-wife wasn't good support. I was lying to other people about my addiction. I think a lot of people do this in the very beginning. Is there's a lot of shame with your addiction when it really comes to the stuff we've done or the substances we've done. Like, alcohol's okay or painkillers is okay. That's socially acceptable. But there's a lot of stuff that's not socially acceptable, and you don't want to talk to your spouse about it. And that's why when I was talking with Kobe and he showed me Sam and this AI sponsor, in a sense, I was like, okay, it's not a human being, but it's somebody that I could talk to at 3 a.m. when I'm by myself, because that's when it was the worst.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just reflecting on the things that you just mentioned, which, like I said, very powerful, and I can relate in some aspects of sometimes addiction really is, it can become a root of a problem in itself. Like, if you're using for a long time, it can be a problem, but a lot of the times it was a solution to a different problem, and you might forget like what that problem was. Like, for me, I have learned that until you get the root of issues, you can cut off like all the weeds you want on top, but until you find out like what is that thing that is driving you to use, or like what is that thing that is making you just so scared about life, until you find that thing and look at it, try and remove it or take care of it, if that's a part of yourself, these things can keep occurring because you're only cutting the surface part of the weed. And a lot of the times it is like these numbing, these emotions that we're feeling that we feel like we need to numb. I've experienced that. I've seen so many of like my family members experience that. And it's really, really hard to look at. But that's why I think that sometimes having something like Sam or having like a therapist, if therapy scares you, but just look at it like, having someone who really cares about you getting better and who is in your corner, almost like a coach. Like, that's how therapists think when they think about addiction and when they're thinking about trauma. Like, they want to help get you to where you want to be. It might be really hard. You're going to say a lot of things and you're going to think about a lot of things that might be scary, but the end result is you having a new lease on life and you being able to escape those patterns in your life. So I am also just super excited to work with you on Sunflower Sober, because we are trying to make this affordable and really approachable, like just no shame involved. It's got brilliant people like you, Eric, who are actually thinking very hard about how do we make something that just makes sense and actually helps people with where they're at. And I don't think that unfortunately, a lot of people don't think that way. So it's really great to be able to work with you on those things.
No, it's same with you, because you get it, and that's where, like, for me, a big thing that has, like, really, I think you hit it on the head of, we almost forget and devalue what that solution to what problem it was. I was using for so long that I didn't know what problem. It created so many problems of its own that I couldn't even essentially at one point say what the original problem was. And when I really broke it down in therapy, it was my anxious attachment style. And I believe there's a lot when it comes to attachment theory that drives people with addiction. And I think it's something that's heavily overlooked because, like, anxious attachment, for example, you're constantly hypervigilant. You don't know if you're going to be loved or not loved. And you're constantly fighting for love. You're constantly fighting for acceptance. You don't know how to self-love yourself. There's no way I can self-regulate. I need others to regulate my emotions. I'm dependent on others. And that's why I think that my addiction, the first time I did booger sugar was in high school, and I didn't get hooked. I did it. It gave me some energy. My gums went numb and stuff like that. But I liked alcohol, whatever. But the next time I did it, it was like my salvation. I was 23 years old, and I was going through my very first divorce, and it was ugly and it was hard. But I had nobody there to emotionally regulate me anymore. Like, this is the first time now. I mean, I got married at 19. I don't have my mom. I don't have my dad. I have no adult figure around to emotionally regulate me. And this made me feel good. And it's like I found my emotional regulation in a substance. That's the part of it that hooked me. Was no matter how bad all of a sudden life is getting, I don't know how to calm myself down, and I don't know how to tell myself it's going to be okay and to soothe myself. But this powder right here does. And it almost like warped my thought process, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, you know, I know it's still, I mean, it's a theory when it comes to attachment theory, but it's something I really, really connected with.
I think that's a really powerful association that you picked up on, which is, it might even be the answer to the original question you had, which was like, are these things gateway drugs? And that's a very broad question, but I think at its essence, you're asking like, is this thing taking control out of my own life and putting me at risk for continuing to do that in the future? And I think that there are things like anxious attachment styles, there's different types of personalities, ADHD, different ways that people are born into the world with that make them more at risk. And sometimes when you use a substance and it takes out that control out of your life and you then rely on it, that could be like what is the metaphorical gateway to finding solutions outside of yourself. One of the things that I see that people do well in their sobriety is like they bring that control and they bring all that power back into their own body. So it's not like I need to do this thing to feel good. It's like I'm gonna feel good because I deserve it, and I deserve love and I deserve grace, and I'm gonna give myself that. And like substances be damned, but you kind of put that power back into yourself, and that's just such a really, really powerful thing. And it's something I see you do a lot when you're talking.
And it's something that I see. We could sit here and have a compliment session. I'll just keep going. It's something though that I see from you of the. Yeah. I think as addicts, what we're looking for is a validation of what where we're going mentally, and that like the one thing that I find of why I thrive talking to you so much is and it of course has to do with my upbringing. My dad was a doctor, so I always looked at education because of how I was raised. The higher education is, the better the validation is, if that makes sense, even though there really isn't a scale. But, welcome to childhood trauma, I guess. And that's why, even when you say stuff like in your validation to it, it's like, okay, like my brain, like I am figuring it out. Great. I'm having that input and again, why I feel like AA and NA to me didn't really work very well. And again, I know that they work. Like I won't bash them because I'm so open-minded that you got to find what works for you. But one of the things I really needed was validation. And the one thing I never got out of those type of programs was validation of, yes, you're on the right path. It was always, well, listen to this video or read this part out of the video. I'm just looking for validation, bro. Am I going down the right path or not? And so let me ask you this, because this is something that had just popped in my brain. One of the things I've noticed with cannabis, because it's to me, it's the most controversial substance when it comes to like getting sober and stuff. And I watch people get really defensive. When I was growing up, we called it brick. It was I can't say the whole thing, but it was Mexican brick grass, and it came in like bricks. That's how it was shipped. I mean, we're talking like 90s here, or mid 90s, and it did not have a high THC content. I mean, you're pulling out seeds and stems and stuff.
Yeah.
And as time has went on, I remember as a kid you hear about like hydroponics, or you hear about these hybrids, and this stuff has been bred so much that higher and higher THC contents that they didn't used to have. Do you think that affects the addictiveness of cannabis, but also doesn't change necessarily the stereotype that hey, it's not that harmful in a sense?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I think it is. This is like a space that is like you're right. It's controversial, but I mean, I'm just looking at the facts, Eric, like you just laid out. These things, the products have become so much more concentrated. The strains of the plant have become much more genetically specific to get a specific type of reaction out of your brain. And again, all our brains are different. All our genes are different. Your liver, which processes out the toxins, is different. So like, me having half Japanese descent, like I have specific enzymes in my liver that can be slower than someone else's, maybe yours. So it might take less of that substance to get me to be intoxicated or be really wired. And, just reflecting on my experience as a doctor, I'm seeing just more people in the emergency room who had tried weed, not even for the first time, but they got a strain that created a very high like sympathetic response. So they're fainting. Their heart rate is like in the 200s, which is a very dangerous place for your heart to be. And a doctor is going to be like, "Whoa, what's going on? Like, are you having a heart attack? Are you having an abnormal heart rhythm?" And I've just noticed like it's THC tends to be part of the picture, and it is just more concentrated these days, and people react to them. Some people react to them very strongly. So part of that is you're not getting the same hit every time. And that activates your dopamine system. It's like, oh, whoa, I got this much last time. Am I going to get this much or am I going to get this much? It's kind of the same thing that happens with slot machines and gambling. It's like that random reward. And so that in itself can also play a role in you getting hooked onto something.
That makes a lot. See, I wish I could just take your whole brain. Like it just blows my mind because you are right, and it even came down to my drug of choice. Every time was different. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it was stronger, sometimes it was cut, sometimes it's all different feelings, and it was almost this way of your brain knowing that it's going to make you feel good, but it was almost like your brain could never exactly know how it was going to make you feel. So you almost kind of went into it with this weird anxiety in a sense, like this weird little thing in your stomach of like, all right, let's hope this time it's going to make me feel this way. And if it didn't, it was like this quick readjustment, like, well, I need more, or wait, what's happening? Now mad anxiety. But yet we still thought we could control it. We still kind of thought it was all the same. And it does make sense of how it tricks your brain, just like gambling, because gambling addiction to me is so fascinating because it's not a substance. And that's what I was such a firm believer, and this goes to show, per se, my lack of education of why I share from lived experience only, is that I didn't even think of how much dopamine it really creates of that risk versus reward. And you made the most sense of it ever to me when you were talking about like Pokemon cards and stuff like that. Because like I could spend $100, and if I pulled a $2 card, man, I got my dopamine hit. I feel good. But then there was an emptiness inside me because logically I'm thinking to myself, I just spent $100 and I got $2 back. This isn't a good value. But I felt good still, And then you take this to a substance that's actually addictive or playing at a higher level, and it can become all more consuming so much easier. So when does cannabis affect GABA at all?
Before I answer that, have you heard of Labubu dolls, Eric?
Yes, I have heard. My wife has a Labubu now. She really wanted one. I got her one, but yes.
What is your take on Labubu dolls? I'm just curious.
I don't get it, but I think it was the genius marketing of a random box of what one are you going to get. And I think anytime that it's a random thing and there's a chance of getting duplicates and stuff, I think it becomes a little bit more easily to obsess about. Like Beanie Babies or whatever they were, you went and bought that Beanie Baby. With these, you don't know what you're getting in the box. You know what I mean? So I see a different obsession around them in a way.
I get the same vibe. For me, and we share this, like Pokemon cards, like getting that booster pack and just not knowing if you're gonna get a shiny Pokemon or like, you know, the Pokemon that you actually want. And sometimes you do, and it's like the best feeling ever. And that right there is your dopamine response. It's like saying, hey, you did a good job. The stakes were high because you didn't know if you were gonna get it. When we actually look at like gambling and like addictions to like random rewards that way, what's interesting is that the dopamine spikes when you get the reward. Yes, that goes down over time, so it spikes less and less and less. Where it spikes the most with a gambling addiction is if you just barely missed it. Let's say you got like a 7-7 cherry. That causes more dopamine release than getting a 7-7-7, which is bonkers to me. It's backwards. Like you would expect the dopamine to be up here if you just won $10,000, but it actually gets really, really high when you just miss it. And what we're learning about the brain is like your brain is a anticipation system. It's a heat-seeking missile for reward. So it will change its direction based on how close it's getting to its target. And what we see in gambling is if you almost win big, that is information to your brain that, hey, I am heat seeking right onto my reward. And what do? You increase the amount of money you spend, you keep going, you think it's the next one, I'm gonna win. And your brain doesn't get excited about winning. It gets excited about just barely losing, which is just, it's backwards, and it's part of why addiction is so hard.
No, that's the weirdest thing too, is because when you do get what you wanted, it's never enough. Because it wasn't, you get it and you're just like, oh, now I got it. It's almost like do I stop now? Like you don't want to stop. It almost hits you. And I can relate this to actually doing booger sugar. When it came to the point that I'm almost out, it was very depressing. It wasn't that I'm really high. It was very depressing because I'm like, now it was like in my face, like this is a crossroads where you should stop or you can stop.
Yeah.
And it was so raw and in your face that you're like, but I don't want to. And it was like this emptiness inside. It was really, and I could see that even with the gambling even now and cards and stuff. Cause like, yeah, I've gotten what I wanted. And as soon as I did, I'm like, oh, I guess I don't get any more of this one now. And it's just this weird emptiness feeling. That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah. Back in the day when we were cavemen or like we were hunter-gatherers, that part of your brain was extremely useful for survival. Like you wanted to be able to have a GPS system in your mind to say like, oh, I found food, or like I found a deer in that location. I'm going to remember where that location is. I'm going to remember all the cues. I remember tasting a sweet fruit. I'm going to remember that the next time I come out. And your brain is just predicting. It's predicting. It's looking for risk. So like any tiger in the bushes, and it's also looking for reward. So in the context of how we, through evolution and how we think that human brains have formed, it really was designed to find the quickest path to reward and remember where that reward came from. What is different now in 2025 is that those rewards are so concentrated, like just even sugar, like it's everywhere. Everything has to be super sweet. Like we said, the THC is so strong. The social media is just like designed to capture your attention in ways that our primitive brains were not designed for. And again, that's the lizard part of your brain. It's not your CEO. It is the automatic response deep inside your brain. It's really hard. And sometimes the things that we get addicted to are just so well designed to hijack our brains.
Yeah, no, that's the worst part is that you get your brain gets hijacked and you really just don't even realize it is.
No.
And that's the worst part. Now, when it comes to dopamine, I mean, what naturally do you suggest for people to do for dopamine? Because I mean, that is one of the things that you lose.
Mm-hmm.
What can help with it?
So just know that doing nothing, so being sober, which is akin to just stopping where you were getting your what I call outside dopamine, will naturally allow your brain to heal. So what will happen in the next 2 weeks, your brain will be frustrated with you because it's like, hey, I used to get this, now I'm low. If you get through that phase, your brain will start to realize I need to bring back my dopamine receptors. So it'll start adding more receptors through something called neuroplasticity. It will recreate brain circuits that don't have to do with addiction. They might have to do with connecting with your loved ones. They might have to do with engaging with hobbies that you really enjoy. After months, the brain then reprioritizes what's important to you. So it will reassign what triggers your dopamine. And that might be things that really make your life more meaningful. And so the thing that I would always recommend is just be patient with the process. Know that your brain is deficient neurobiologically, but also the addiction was serving a process for you. It was giving you control. So psychologically, it's helpful to think about how to bring that control back into your own being. And sometimes you need help. Sometimes you need a therapist. Sometimes you need a sponsor like Sunflower. But that process will occur, and that process brings back that dopamine system that was hijacked before.
Then, lastly, because I know I try not to take you up for more than an hour, but when it comes to, I'll use Sunflower Sober for an example. And if you guys haven't downloaded it, download it. You get 30 free days right now. You know, I'll talk to people about Sunflower Sober. Sobriety tracking app. It has a community in there for help. It has a AI sponsor for 24/7 support. It has, I love the journaling section, actually. Journaling has been really always key to me. I never realized the importance of journaling until I realized it was kind of like working out, that I could look back 6 months and be like, oh, look at the improvement of where I'm at mental. You have a tool like this. You have 30 free days. There's a tool out there to get sober. And yet people will go, well, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to get sober on my own. I don't need any of this. I don't need rehab. Is that just our brain resisting, or what is it in our brain that connects where we have all these tools, all these resources around us to get sober, that we literally almost push them all away?
I think it has to do with like when you're addicted to something, your world gets so small. Not to say like there aren't other things in your life, but I think your focus on what is important in the world gets so small that it becomes really hard to see everything else in your life that also is important. And there's this level of, for anyone who's going through an addiction, there is this need to address like, hey, this is a problem. Like that is really the first step of seeing that something needs to change, and it's also your responsibility to change those things. And it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really empowering thing to say like, hey, I can do this, and I'm going to change. I think until you address that, like at the fundamental level, like find your why for being sober, it'll be hard to see like all the things that are available to you. Because once you find a reason, I see this a lot with like heart health, like people who get heart attacks. You can talk to someone all day about lowering their blood pressure, about not eating too much sugar, not eating too much salt, exercising, getting sleep to help their heart. And you could tell that to someone day in and day out, but it doesn't click until they have a heart attack. And then for some reason, the brain is like, oh shit, it makes sense. I don't want that again. And so you'll see people who, like right after they have a heart attack, bam, they do everything. They start exercising, they start eating well, they just reprioritize what's important in their lives. And it's like that light bulb that turns on, like, this is something that's really important. I want to be here for a long time. I have people that I love. I just experienced a really scary thing. You address that why. Why do you want to be sober? Why do you want to be healthy? Why do you want your heart to be healthy? this is like really the big question for a lot of people when they get started is like, what are you doing this for? And you should try to answer that. And it's going to be personal to you. Once you get that, then you're in a better place to say like, where are my tools? How am I going to do this? Let's get going. Let's download Sunflower Sober. I got 30 days. That's enough time to get hit on the ground running. Let me get a therapist. Whatever works for you. Start with your why. And when you have that, you're just starting from a place of power and lots of control. So that's what I would recommend.
No, and see, this is again why I love talking to you. I could talk to you forever because now it makes sense of how I got sober. Like I could never tell people like really how I got sober, but I got sober because my why was so much that I wanted to like prove my dad wrong in a sense. You know, I lost my dad. I didn't really want to get sober originally. I was going to get sober for 6 months, put my life back together, and then I was just going to relapse because that's easy to do. But when he passed, I was like, okay, he never got to see me sober, and I kind of like latched onto that, and it became the massive why. And that's where I think it almost jacked my brain up, where I was like, well, if you want it bad enough, you're going to do it. Which I think, like you said, there's a lot of truth to that. But it's also like, whoa, Tiger, like we're all different in a different way when it comes to how strong we are behind that why. And I love how you said that of like once you really realize that why, you find a lot of empowerment behind it. And I think that's rad. And that is where, like, you know, a lot of times that's why I think it's so important that people see a psychiatrist and they get into Sunflower Sober and they talk to Sam and they talk to somebody else, because your brain will find the answers yourself if you could just talk to somebody and have it bounce back and forth.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, part of my job, so not everyone needs to see a psychiatrist, but people who do, like, part of my job is helping them find their why. Because when you're addicted, you're depressed, you're not getting sleep, it's really hard to think clearly. And it's easy to focus on the negatives. Sometimes it really takes another human being outside yourself to say, hey, like, I see all of these awesome things about you, all these strengths. Do you think that these are your values? And that's one piece that I can play, which is to help them figure out what their why is, so that when we work together, we work from a place of strength and weakness. That's what I think we're trying to do in Sunflower with Sam, is to help you find out like what is important to you when you're journaling. You're really reflecting on the values and anchoring all that you do in society to what is most important to you. And I think that's just the most powerful first step that you can do, is like say, hey, this is why I'm here. This is why I want to quit. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I know why. That's the first step.
Well, I appreciate it, Keith. I'll let you go. I'm going to save this. I'm going to make this into a podcast again. If you guys want to see Keith's in my first podcast, that's actually, I released it today, so it's actually out. We have to do more of this. I got to get with Kobe. We got to get to San Francisco.
I would love to, like, yeah, we need to be in person. It's always hard, like, talking to a screen, and we need to. I feel like we could talk for hours, and I'm like looking at the comments too. They're like really funny, but also super insightful. So I feel like we could do this for a long time, and I'm really glad that we were able to talk today.
You know, the most amazing thing I've ever learned with the comments, like here, you know, I can't see the comments on yours, and so yours are actually different comments than what I have. And there's always trolling comments and stuff, but it's amazing how many people are always asking for help and always have questions. And it's like you have something that has a lot of the answers with Sunflower Sober. But even then, it's just the ability to help people is just one of those things that's just a great gift. But all righty, man, I am gonna let you go. I appreciate you. I will message you here in just a couple minutes on Slack.
All right.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Eric. Everyone, be well. Have a great rest of your day.
And if you haven't signed up for Sunflower Sober, sign up. Links are in both the bios. Download it. It's awesome. Thank you. Better gift, babe. All right. Bye.